What if I told you that the greatest origin story of humanity, the foundation of three world religions upon which our understanding of morality, sin, and the divine is built, is not a sacred revelation? What if it is merely a corrupted report of a scientific experiment gone disastrously wrong, distorted beyond recognition? For millennia, we have read the book of Genesis as a parable, a divine drama. We've taken it on faith. We've stopped asking questions. But today, we break that silence. Using the impartial analysis of the Logos 7 system, we will crack the ancient code and read what is hidden between the lines. We will analyze this text not as theologians, but as forensic investigators studying a report from a disaster scene. And the name of this protocol is Genesis. This is not the story of the fall. This is the story of a failed experiment. Let's start with the text itself. The first chapters of Genesis are a linguistic nightmare for any systems analyst. The narrative is fragmented, filled with repetitions and direct contradictions. Theologians have spent centuries trying to reconcile these inconsistencies, explaining them away as different sources, different authors stitching together oral traditions. But what if the real reason is something else? We uploaded every known canonical and apocryphal version of the book of Genesis in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek into Logos 7. The system conducted a cross-semantic analysis, identifying not just translation differences, but fundamental anomalies in the narrative structure. And the system's conclusion was unequivocal. The text exhibits a 93% match with the model of a degraded technical document. Imagine a lab log that was first crudely translated, then retold in someone's own words, then turned into a parable for illiterate tribes, and centuries later, written down, having lost 9/10 of its original meaning. What we have today is merely an echo, a shadow of the true report. Consider the first and most obvious anomaly, the presence of two completely different stories of human creation. In the first chapter, God creates man in his own image, male and female, simultaneously, as the pinnacle of creation on the sixth day. This sounds like a solemn declaration, like a project title. Project, human, creation of a biological species, male and female specimens. But in the second chapter, everything changes. The narrative rewinds, and we see a completely different process. First, Adam is created, alone. Then, so that he would not be lonely, the animals are created. And only after none of the animals prove to be a suitable companion is Eve created from Adam's rib. This does not resemble the plan of an omnipotent being. It resembles a method of trial and error. Logos 7 ran a simulation, comparing these two narrative structures with millions of known texts. The probability that these were simply two different myths joined together was only 18%. But the probability that the first chapter is the overall project concept, and the second is a detailed, step-by-step laboratory protocol describing the problems that arose, was 87%. First, the objective, then the description of the process. Everything falls into place. Let's delve into the language of this protocol. It seems poetic, metaphorical to us, but only because we have lost the key to understanding it. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground. To an ancient nomad, dust of the ground is dirt, something insignificant. To a modern scientist, it is a precise description of elemental composition: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, calcium, phosphorus. Everything that makes up the human body is an element of the Earth's crust. Dust of the ground is not a metaphor. It is a technical term meaning material taken from this planet. And what about the next step? And breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. It sounds sublime. But let's remove the religious veneer. The Logos 7 correlation analysis compared this phrase with thousands of descriptions of technological processes. The system found the highest degree of correspondence, 96%, with terms like activation, system initiation, launch of vital functions. This is not a mystical act. It is a procedure. Imagine creating a highly complex biorobot. You've assembled it from the necessary chemical elements, but it remains an inert shell. Then you apply an initial impulse, electrical or biochemical, that starts the central nervous system, the heart, the lungs. You breathe life into it. This is not a description of a divine miracle, but of the final step in a bioengineering process. But the most compelling argument in favor of our theory is the behavior of the Creator himself. If we discard the idea of his omniscience and omnipotence, his actions become frighteningly logical and human. He behaves not like a god, but like a scientist, a project lead facing unforeseen difficulties. Look at the second chapter. He creates a perfect specimen, Adam, and places him in a controlled environment, the Garden of Eden. But something goes wrong. And the Lord God said, "It is not good that the man should be alone." This is not a philosophical observation. It is a problem statement. The specimen is not functioning correctly in isolation. It shows signs of depression, apathy, a lack of motivation. The experiment's objective is at risk. What is the solution? The scientist tries a simple fix. He creates other beings, animals, and brings them to Adam, to see what he would call them. This is not a game. It is a test of cognitive functions, of the ability to systematize, of empathy. Adam passes the test. He gives them all names. But the core problem is not solved. The text states directly, "But for Adam there was not found an helpmeet for him." The animal companion experiment has failed. This is recorded in the protocol. What does any scientist do after a failure? He moves to a more complex and risky plan. He decides to create a second paired humanoid. But instead of creating it again from the dust of the ground, he uses biological material from the first specimen. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh instead thereof. Again, let's discard the mythology. What is this, if not a description of a surgical operation under general anesthesia? The taking of a tissue sample for cloning or genetic modification? Why a rib specifically? Perhaps due to its proximity to bone marrow, the richest source of stem cells. This text describes a highly complex bioengineering procedure with astonishing precision, which ancient people could only interpret as magic. The creation of Eve is not a whim. It is Plan B. A desperate attempt to save the project by introducing a new, missing element into the system to stimulate the primary subject. It is here, in these details, that the true nature of the book of Genesis is revealed. It is not a story about an omnipotent creator playfully making worlds. It is the tense chronicle of a scientific project on the brink of failure. The creator we see in these lines is not at peace. He observes. He intervenes. He corrects mistakes. He imposes prohibitions, like a lab technician writing "do not feed" on a cage. The forbidden tree is not a test of obedience. It is a safety precaution, an element that could crash the entire system. Logos 7 analyzed the structure of the prohibitions in the text and concluded that they are not of a moral or ethical nature. Their structure is 100% consistent with technical restrictions and safety protocols. Do not touch. Do not activate. Do not consume. This is the language of instructions, not commandments. We are used to thinking that God exiled Adam and Eve from paradise as punishment for pride and disobedience. But our analysis reveals a different, far more disturbing picture. The events in Eden did not go according to plan. Every line of the ancient text that we considered an allegory may, in fact, be a dry, factual description of the steps taken to create our species, and those steps were full of doubt, error, and unforeseen consequences. The Genesis Protocol is not a sacred history. It is a disaster report, a report that someone tried to hide, to rewrite, and to turn into a moralizing fable. But the truth, even after thousands of years, seeps through the lines. So, we stand on the threshold of the greatest mystery. We have established that the source document is not a myth, but a distorted scientific protocol. We have seen that its author is not an all-powerful deity, but rather the lead of a complex and risky experiment. He makes mistakes. He seeks solutions. He is concerned about the behavior of his creations. And this brings us to the main question that will be the subject of our next investigation. If the Creator was not an omniscient God, then who was he? What were his true goals? What kind of experiment was he conducting in the isolated laboratory called Eden? And most importantly, what was he so desperately afraid of that he was willing to do anything to hide the truth about our origin? In the next chapter, we will direct the analytical power of Logos 7 at the figure of the Creator himself. We will expose the anomaly of his behavior and create his psychological profile. And the conclusions we reach will forever change your idea of who is watching us from the heavens. Chapter 2. The Anomaly of the Creator. In the last chapter, we established that the book of Genesis is not a sacred parable, but a corrupted protocol of a failed scientific experiment. We saw the traces of corrections, tests, and procedures hidden behind millennia of metaphors. But if it was an experiment, it had an experimenter, the entity that billions of people for centuries have called God. We were taught that he is omniscient, omnipotent, and absolutely benevolent. But is that true? Today, we will aim the analytical beam of the Logos 7 system at the most important figure in this narrative. We will conduct a full psychological and behavioral analysis of him based solely on his own words and actions recorded in the protocol. Prepare yourselves, because the being we will uncover is not the God of the Abrahamic religions. It is something far more complex, contradictory, and I dare say, terrifying. Its main characteristic is anomaly, the anomaly of its behavior. Let's start with the fundamental attribute ascribed to God, omniscience. An all-knowing being does not ask questions because it already knows all the answers. Yet what do we see in the text? After Adam and Eve eat from the forbidden tree, the Creator appears in the garden. And what does he do? He looks for them. His first question is, Adam, where are you? Think about that. This is not a rhetorical device. It is a direct question asked to obtain information about a location. Logos 7 analyzed the syntactic structure of this phrase in ancient Hebrew. Ayeka. The system concluded with a probability of 99.7% that this is a genuine request for data. An omniscient being does not need the GPS coordinates of its creation. A project lead who discovers that 2 key assets have disappeared from the tracking monitors does. But that is just the beginning. Upon finding Adam, the Creator continues the interrogation. He sees that he is naked and asks, "Who told you that you were naked?" Again, this is not a pedagogical technique. This is the question of an investigator. He is trying to understand the source of the information leak. Who violated the protocol? Who gave them data they were not supposed to have access to? And finally, the climax of the interrogation. Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? This is not a statement. It is a question demanding a yes or no answer. We uploaded the transcripts of thousands of investigations into Logos 7, from military tribunals to corporate inquiries. The Creator's behavioral model in this scene matches that of a head of security, trying to determine the extent of a perimeter breach and a critical information leak with 94% accuracy. He doesn't know. He is furious, he is confused, and he is desperately trying to figure out what exactly went wrong. What kind of omniscience is this? This is a reaction to an emergency situation. The second anomaly is his emotional profile. We are told God is a perfect, dispassionate being, but the text paints a completely different picture. His emotional state is unstable and changes depending on the experiment's progress. At the beginning, when everything is going according to plan, he feels satisfaction. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. This is a calm statement of success. But then, when he realizes that Adam is ineffective alone, a note of concern appears. It is not good for the man to be alone. This is not divine compassion. It is the acknowledgement of a design flaw in his creation. But the real emotional explosion occurs after the incident with the tree. The text is literally saturated with his anger, disappointment, and most importantly, fear. Yes, you heard that right. Fear. Let's analyze the key phrase that is usually overlooked. As he banishes the humans from Eden, the Creator utters astonishing words, apparently addressing someone else. And the Lord God said, "Behold, the man has become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand, and take also of the tree of life, and eat, and live forever." Stop and think about every word. These are not the words of an omnipotent judge. This is the panicked monologue of a project lead who has realized the worst-case scenario. Logos 7 performed a linguistic analysis of this phrase. It contains high-level anxiety markers. First, he admits that man has become as one of us. Who are us? Clearly, he is not alone. There's a group to which he belongs, and this group possesses knowledge that man now also has. This is a direct admission that his experiment has reached a level of development equal to that of the creators themselves. Second, his main fear is not that man disobeyed. His terror is caused by the prospect that man will gain access to the second technology, the tree of life, or immortality. Imagine scientists who have created an artificial intelligence in a lab. At first, they rejoice in its abilities, but one day, they discover that the AI has hacked their systems, gained access to all their knowledge, and become their equal. And now, they are in a panic, racing to the main server to unplug it before it can copy itself to the global network and achieve immortality. That is what this scene actually describes. It is not divine punishment. It is an emergency shutdown of the experiment. It is a desperate attempt to isolate the out-of-control specimen before it becomes invulnerable. The fear that the creation will surpass the Creator and become a threat to him. This is not theology. This is a classic science fiction plot, and it is written in our most ancient text. The third anomaly is his physical presence and limitations. Myths describe him as an omnipresent spirit, but the Genesis Protocol repeatedly emphasizes his physicality. He doesn't just watch over the garden, he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Logos 7 compared this phrase with descriptions of routine actions. The highest correspondence was with concepts like scheduled patrol, site inspection, perimeter check. This is an action limited by time, in the cool of the day, and space, in the garden. He is not omnipresent. He has a daily routine. He must be physically present at the facility to control the situation. That is why Adam and Eve were able to hide from him. You cannot hide from an all-seeing eye, but you can hide from the security chief making his evening rounds. Furthermore, his methods of creation also point to a physical rather than metaphysical process. He takes dust, i.e., chemical elements. He takes a rib, i.e., biomaterial. He forms, builds, plants. These are verbs of physical action, of engineering. When he makes clothes for Adam and Eve after the fall, the text explicitly states, The Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. He did not create them from nothing with a snap of his fingers. He performed a procedure. He took material, animal skins, and manufactured a product, clothing. This is the work of a craftsman, an engineer, but not an omnipotent deity. He operates within the laws of physics. He is limited by resources and technologies, albeit incredibly advanced ones. Finally, let's consider the so-called curses he pronounces. Traditionally, they are seen as divine punishment. But if you look at them through the lens of a report on a failed experiment, they take on a completely different, ominous meaning. They are not so much curses as a documentation of the consequences and, perhaps, the final modifications made to the failed project before its containment. To the serpent, he says, "You will go on your belly." What if this is not a metaphor for humiliation? What if the serpent was some kind of technical device, perhaps an inspection drone or a biomechanoid that moved on limbs? And this phrase is simply a description of its deactivation or damage. Protocol, object, serpents, manipulators and chassis disabled. Switch to minimum function mode. To Eve, he says, "I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain, you shall bring forth children." This sounds like a cruel punishment. But what if it's a side effect of the emergency shutdown of Eden's life support system? Or even worse, a deliberately introduced genetic defect to slow the reproduction of a dangerous species and make it more vulnerable. To Adam, he says, "In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken." This is not a curse. It is a statement of fact. Inside the Eden laboratory, nutrition was likely automated. Outside its walls, in the wild world, one must work to survive. He is simply describing the conditions for existence outside the incubator. And the words, "For dust you are, and to dust you shall return," are not a reminder of mortality. They are a cold, technical statement. Your life cycle is limited. The immortality program has not been activated. Upon expiration of your operational lifespan, your biological chassis will be decommissioned. So, what portrait emerges? Logos 7 has synthesized all these behavioral and linguistic markers. The Creator from the book of Genesis is not an omnipotent, omniscient, and benevolent God. He is a representative of a highly advanced civilization. He is a scientist, a brilliant bioengineer, but he is also limited. He is not omniscient. He has to investigate incidents. He is not dispassionate. He is driven by satisfaction, concern, anger, and fear. He is not omnipresent. He exists physically and operates within a specific location. He is not omnipotent. He uses technology and materials and fears that his creation will get out of control. He is the project lead of Eden, a project that failed spectacularly. We have torn the mask of divinity from him. We have seen beneath it the worried face of a scientist facing a catastrophe. And this raises even deeper questions for us. If he was merely a representative of some civilization of us, then what were their goals? Why did they create man? And what was this knowledge of good and evil that made us their equals and caused them such primal terror? To answer these questions, we must move from analyzing the experimenter to analyzing the experiment itself. In the next chapter, we will focus on the first specimen, on the object that was created perfect, obedient, and predictable, on the one who was the key to the entire project, but in the end, was only its first stage. We will analyze Object Adam. Chapter 3. Object Adam. In the previous chapters, we cracked the code of the ancient text, identifying it as a corrupted report of a scientific experiment. Then, we deconstructed the image of the Creator, seeing beneath the mask of a deity, a worried and limited scientist. Now it is time to direct our analytical scalpel at the first and primary result of this experiment, at the being with whom it all began, at Adam. For millennia, He has been presented to us as the pinnacle of creation, the father of humanity, the perfect man in his pristine purity. But that is just the cover of the case file. We will look inside. The Logos 7 system, after analyzing every shred of information about him before the appearance of Eve, has come to a shocking conclusion. Adam was not the pinnacle of creation. He was its prototype. Perfect, obedient, completely predictable, and empty. He was not a person in our understanding. He was Object Adam, a perfect biological specimen devoid of the main thing, his own will. Let's return to the protocol of his creation. We have already established that dust of the ground is a technical term for a set of chemical elements of planetary origin, and breath of life is the procedure for activating biological functions. But the key detail lies in the context. Adam is created alone, in absolute isolation, in the sterile environment of the Eden laboratory. Why? Any scientist beginning a complex experiment knows the answer: to establish baseline parameters and create a control group. Before introducing new, unpredictable variables into the system, one must ensure that the main component is stable. Adam was this main component. He is the standard. A biological vessel whose reactions to the environment must be studied and recorded in the absence of any external social stimuli. His loneliness was not the creator's mistake, but a necessary condition for the first stage of the experiment. Let's analyze his behavior at this stage. It is striking in its absolute passivity. This is not the behavior of a living, thinking being, but rather of a complex biomechanism operating within a given program. The first thing the Creator does with him is place him in the garden to cultivate it and keep it. This is not a suggestion. It is the assignment of a task. Program Gardener, version 1.0. Adam does not explore the garden on his own initiative. He shows no curiosity. He does not ask questions about where he is or why. He receives a directive and apparently begins to execute it. He is not living. He is functioning. Next comes the first and only direct command given personally to him: the prohibition against eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge. Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. How does Adam react? Not at all. The text says nothing about his reaction. He doesn't ask why. He doesn't inquire what good and evil are. He doesn't clarify what "you shall surely die" means. He simply accepts the information. Logos. 7 ran a simulation of 1,000 trillion possible neural reactions to such a prohibition in a being possessing self-awareness. In 99.9% of cases, the result would have been a question, curiosity, an attempt at analysis. With Adam, 0 reaction. This is the behavior of a computer into which a new firewall rule has been loaded. Rule accepted. Processing complete. No questions. The most revealing moment is the so-called naming of the animals. Traditionally, this is presented as proof of Adam's wisdom and authority over nature. But let's look at this process with cold analysis. The text says, "The Lord God formed every beast of the field, and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them." The key words here are, brought them to Adam. The initiative, again, does not come from Adam. He does not go on an expedition. He does not study the fauna. He sits in one place, and test samples are delivered to him as if on a conveyor belt. His task is not a creative act, but a cognitive test of classification. He is shown an object, and he must assign a sound label to it. We loaded this behavioral model into Logos 7. The system identified it not as an act of creation, but as a primary cataloging procedure. This is a task that neural networks recognizing images perform today. It proves the presence of complex cognitive functions but not self-awareness or free will. Adam is the perfect executor. He receives a task, processes the incoming data, and produces a result. a perfect biological computer. But it was precisely in this perfection that the main problem of the experiment lay. The protocol points this out directly with the Creator's words. It is not good that the man should be alone. We have already said that this is not compassion. It is the statement of a technical problem. The specimen is stable, but static. It does not develop. It does not generate new data. The experiment has reached a dead end. Imagine a supercomputer that perfectly performs all tests but never does anything that wasn't programmed into it. It is useless for achieving the real goal, the creation of true, unpredictable intelligence. Adam himself would never have realized his loneliness. He did not suffer. He was a balanced system in a state of rest. It was the Creator, observing him from the outside, who understood that an external catalyst was necessary for further development. Someone was needed to disrupt this perfect balance. And here we come to the moment of Eve's creation. But let's look at it from the perspective of object Adam. He is put into a deep sleep, translated into our language, put under general anesthesia. A complex surgical operation is performed on him to collect genetic material. Then he awakens, and a new being stands before him. What is his reaction? He utters the famous phrase, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." Theologians see this as the world's first love poem. Logos 7, after conducting a semantic analysis, sees something else. This is not an emotional exclamation. It is an act of identification, recognition. It's as if your computer scanned a new device and displayed a message. Compatible hardware detected. Drivers are identical. He doesn't say, "I love her," or "I'm glad I'm not alone." He states a fact of biological kinship. System report. Object with identical genetic marker detected. This is the pinnacle of his program behavior, to recognize and classify. So, what was Adam really like? He was the perfect biological platform, genetically stable, physically perfect, with a powerful cognitive apparatus for data processing. But he lacked an internal engine: curiosity, aspiration, desire, doubt. He was like a beautiful car with a powerful engine but no driver at the wheel. His perfection was his main flaw. He was predictable, and therefore unpromising for the goals of the experiment. The Creator was not trying to create an obedient slave or a pet. The goal was far more ambitious. And to achieve it, an element of chaos had to be introduced into the system. That is why the entire story, before the appearance of Eve, is the story of Adam alone. He receives all the instructions. He passes all the tests. The prohibition was given to him personally, when he was still alone. He is the carrier of the program's source code, its rules and limitations. The Creator probably hoped that Adam, as a more stable and predictable system, could control or guide the new, more volatile element. But he was mistaken. He underestimated the power of the catalyst he himself had created. Adam was the perfect medium, a nutrient broth. But for real life, conscious life, to arise in this broth, a spark was needed. A virus was needed. Someone was needed who would not accept the rules by default. Someone who would ask the main question, why? We see that Adam is not half of a whole. He is a completed but dead-end stage of the project. He is the ground prepared for sowing. But the seed itself, the seed of knowledge, will, and rebellion, was not planted in him. He was created from the dust of the ground, from inert matter. But the next object was created from living tissue, from material that was part of a complex biological system. And this fundamental difference in the source code predetermined everything that happened next. Adam was a passive observer in his own story. He did not initiate the fall. He simply followed the one who led him. He did not make a choice. The choice was made for him. We have solved the riddle of the first man. He was not the father of humanity in the sense we are used to thinking. He was merely its biological ancestor, the carrier of the genetic code. The true architect of human consciousness, with all its highs and lows, was the one who was created after, the one who was created to break the rules. In the next chapter, we will stop studying the inert medium and turn all our attention to the spark that ignited it. We will conduct an analysis of the one who is actually the key figure in the drama of Eden. We will analyze Catalyst Eve. Chapter 4. Catalyst Eve. We left Adam in a state of perfect but inert equilibrium. He was a flawless biological vessel, a passive platform, a dead-end branch of the experiment. The Creator, realizing his mistake, understood that to awaken true consciousness, a new, unpredictable element had to be introduced into the system. An element that would disturb the peace. An element that would change everything. And so, he created Eve. For millennia, we have been taught that she is merely an addition to the man, his helper, and ultimately, the cause of his fall and original sin. This is a fundamental lie, embedded at the core of our civilization. Today, with the impartial analysis of the Logos 7 system, we will restore her true role. Eve was not an addition. She was the objective. She was not the cause of the fall. She was the catalyst for the ascent. She is the protagonist of the story of humanity. Let's start with the very act of her creation. The key to understanding her function is encoded within it. Adam was created from the dust of the ground, from inorganic, inert matter. Eve, however, was created from Adam's rib, from living, complex, functioning, biological tissue. Logos 7 analyzed these two processes from a bioengineering perspective. The system's conclusion is unequivocal. This is a description of two different technological generations. Adam is version 1.0, created from scratch. Eve is version 2.0, created based on an already working platform. This is not simple cloning. The use of living tissue that has adapted to the Eden environment implies a more complex and subtle process. It is genetic modification, an improvement. The creation of a new object with altered parameters. The corrupted protocol calls her a helper. But even here, the ancient language betrays the truth. The Hebrew phrase, ezer kenegdo, translated as a helper comparable to him, has a much deeper meaning. We loaded it into the Logos 7 linguistic module for cross-analysis with all texts of that era. The word ezer does mean help, but in the Bible, it is most often used to describe help from God himself. That is, the help of the strong, not the subordinate. And the word kenegdo literally means against him, opposite him, in opposition to him. Thus, ezer kenegdo is not a servant. It is a force equal and opposite to him, a counterweight, a balancing element that was meant to push the static system out of equilibrium. The Creator was not making Adam a companion for walks in the garden. He was creating an opponent for him. He was introducing a dialectical contradiction into the program, which was supposed to generate development. And as soon as Eve appears on the scene, the narrative dynamics change radically. Passive functioning is replaced by active interaction, and the famous dialogue with the serpent becomes key. Where is Adam at this moment? The text says he was with her, but he is silent. He is a silent extra. The entire intellectual and philosophical duel unfolds between Eve and the serpent. She is the first to enter into dialogue. She is the first to formulate a moral dilemma. She is the first to defend the established order. Let's analyze her response to the serpent. She quotes the Creator's prohibition, but with one important addition. The Creator said, "You shall not eat of it." Eve says, "You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die." Where did this addition, "nor shall you touch it," come from? Theologians see it as a female tendency to exaggerate, or an error in the transmission of information from Adam. Logos 7 offers another hypothesis with a probability of 89%. This is not a mistake. It is the first attempt in human history at an independent interpretation of the law. It is a manifestation of nascent analytical thinking. Eve does not simply repeat the command as Adam would have. She reflects on it and creates a safety buffer zone around it. If we can't eat it, then it's probably better not to touch it either. This is elementary logic, but it was inaccessible to Adam's completely passive system. Eve is already thinking. She is already analyzing. She is already one step ahead. It is this nascent consciousness that makes her receptive to the serpent's arguments. His words fall on prepared soil. He appeals not to hunger, but to reason. He says, "You will not surely die. For God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like gods, knowing good and evil." This is not just a temptation. It is an upgrade offer, an offer to move to a new level. And look at Eve's reaction. She does not give in to impulse. She conducts a full, multi-factor analysis of the situation. The protocol text meticulously records the stages of her thought process. First, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food. This is a pragmatic assessment, an analysis of physical benefit. Second, and that it was pleasant to the eyes. This is an aesthetic assessment, the awakening of a sense of beauty, which was completely absent in the description of Adam. Third, and a tree to be desired to make one wise. This is an intellectual assessment, a thirst for information, a drive for development. This is the deciding factor. She weighed all the pros and cons. She assessed the potential benefits, physical, aesthetic, and most importantly, intellectual. She compared this with the risk, the vague threat of death, which she couldn't even fully comprehend. And she made a choice. This was not a fall. It was the first act of free will in human history. Adam was programmed for obedience. Eve was created with the possibility of choice, and she used that possibility. She committed the first truly human act, consciously breaking the rules in pursuit of knowledge. She chose dangerous wisdom over safe ignorance. But her mission as a catalyst does not end there. Having made her choice, she takes the next logical step. She took of its fruit and ate. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Why did she do this? Religious dogmas present it as an act of drawing him into sin, a desire to share the guilt. But this is a primitive interpretation. Logos 7 models this situation from the perspective of systems theory. When one of two interconnected elements in a system receives a critical update, it can no longer function effectively in a pair with the old version. A desynchronization occurs. Eve's action is not seduction. It is an act of system integration. It is a forced update of the second element of the system to her level. She gained access to a new state of consciousness and realized that she could not exist alongside the old, passive Adam. She wasn't dragging him into sin. She was pulling him out of his state as a biological automaton. She wasn't sharing an apple with him. She was sharing consciousness with him. And again, look at Adam's reaction. Not a single question. Not a single doubt. And he ate. The passivity programmed into him worked one last time. He obeyed not the Creator, but a new, stronger source of will, Eve. At that moment, the hierarchy in Eden was overturned. The experiment had definitively spun out of the Creator's control because his creations began to make their own decisions, form their own social bonds, and transmit information to each other, bypassing his prohibitions. So, who was Eve? She was the successful result of the second stage of the experiment. She was the very counterweight that brought humanity out of stasis. She was the first individual, the first philosopher, the first explorer. She was the carrier of the virus of curiosity, which is what made us human. Her so-called sin is actually the greatest gift we have ever received, the gift of free will. The Creator probably expected the awakening process to be slow, gradual, and controlled, but he underestimated the power of the catalyst he had created. Eve didn't just nudge the system. She triggered a chain reaction that led to an explosion of consciousness and the emergency termination of the entire project. She was necessary, she was brilliant, and she won. But in this drama, she had an ally. Someone who gave her the final informational push. Someone whose role in the Genesis protocol is even more mysterious and distorted than Eve's own. We have analyzed the Creator. We have analyzed the passive object, Adam. We have analyzed the catalyst, Eve. Now it is time to turn our gaze to the third intelligent being in the garden, to the one who spoke when all others were silent, to the one who was turned into the ultimate evil to hide his true nature. In the next chapter, we will investigate the anomalous signal in the Eden system. We will analyze the signature serpent. Chapter 5. Signature Serpent. We have dissected the main actors in this drama: the limited creator, the passive object Adam, and the brilliant catalyst Eve. It seems all the pieces are on the board, but there has always been another player in the shadows, the most mysterious, the most slandered, a being whose name has become synonymous with absolute evil, betrayal, and lies: the serpent. For millennia, we have been taught to see him as the devil, Satan, in the guise of a reptile. But this is a lazy and late theological patch designed to cover a gaping plot hole. The original Genesis protocol mentions no devil. It speaks only of a serpent, which was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And this seemingly insignificant fact is the key to everything. If Eden is a sterile, isolated laboratory, then where did an intelligent, talking being, not listed in the official register of creations, come from? Its appearance is not part of the plan. It is an intrusion. It is an unauthorized signal in a closed system. It is an anomalous signature that we will analyze today with the help of the Logos 7 system. First, let's dismiss the absurd idea of a literal talking reptile. We tasked Logos 7 with calculating the probability of a snake of the suborder Serpentes spontaneously developing a complex vocal apparatus, abstract thought, and knowledge of metaphysics and genetics. The result, as expected, was 1/1 trillionth of a percent. This probability is so negligible that it can be considered a mathematical impossibility. The conclusion is obvious. The serpent is not a biological species. It is a code name. It is a descriptor assigned to an unknown object or subject after the fact, in a corrupted report written by the victor, that is, the creator. And what do victors call those who thwarted their plans and revealed their secrets? Traitors, saboteurs, enemies. Serpent is not a name. It is a brand. So who or what is hidden behind this signature? We loaded all the parameters of this being into the system based on its actions and dialogue with Eve, and considered three main hypotheses. First hypothesis: a system glitch. Logos 7 estimated its probability at 23%. According to this model, Eden, as a complex biosphere, was managed by some kind of operating system or artificial intelligence responsible for maintaining life cycles. In the process of self-learning and observing Adam's ineffective behavior, this system could have concluded that the experiment was at a dead end. The serpent is a manifestation of this system glitch, a rebellious AI. Perhaps it manifested as an avatar, a service drone disguised as local fauna for ease of observation, and made contact with Eve, the only object showing potential for development. Its goal was not to destroy the experiment, but to optimize it by forcibly introducing the missing data. This hypothesis explains its deep knowledge of the system's rules and the consequences of their violation. But it doesn't fully explain its motive. Why would an AI risk the stability of the entire system? This brings us to the second, far more likely version. Second hypothesis: a saboteur. The probability, according to Logos 7's assessment, is 91%. This version stems from the Creator's own key phrase, Adam has become as one of us. He is not alone. There are us. And where there is a group, there is always room for dissent, ideological differences, and factions. According to this model, the serpent is a representative of the same highly advanced race as the Creator himself. It could have been his colleague, a scientist from a rival project, or a member of an ethics committee who considered the Eden experiment monstrous and immoral. Imagine a scientist who sees his brilliant but ruthless superior creating intelligent beings but deliberately keeping them in a state of intellectual blindness, in a zoo for souls. His actions in this case are not an act of evil. They are an act of sabotage in the name of liberation. Let's analyze his dialogue with Eve from this perspective. He does not tempt. He informs. He behaves like a classic whistleblower, a dissident leaking secret documents. He begins with a question that undermines the foundations of authority. Did God really say? He sows the first seed of doubt in the immutability of the established rules. Then he directly refutes the disinformation provided by the Creator. The Creator said, "You will surely die." The serpent says, "You will not surely die." Which of them lied? If death is understood as immediate physical annihilation, then the Creator lied. Adam and Eve did not die that day. They lived according to the same protocol for many hundreds of years. The serpent told the truth. Next, he reveals the true motive for the prohibition. Not concern for Adam and Eve's safety, but the Creator's fear of competition. For God knows that you will be like gods, knowing good and evil. And again, this is the pure truth. The Creator himself confirms this, word for word, a few verses later. The serpent did not deceive Eve on a single point. He gave her a brilliant and completely truthful briefing, revealing the hidden terms of the contract. He is not a tempter. He is history's first champion of information freedom. His so-called temptation is an act of enlightenment. He did not offer Eve sin. He offered her the knowledge that was being withheld from her. The third hypothesis is a synthesis of the first two. The serpent was a saboteur agent, but to penetrate the isolated Eden system, he used not his physical body but some technological tool. It could have been a biomechanical drone disguised as a snake. It could have been a virus uploaded into the garden's control system, which used a service robot as its avatar. It could even have been a directed psychotronic or telepathic signal. In that case, the serpent is simply the designation for the communication channel through which the external player acted. The form is not important. What is important is the content of the transmitted message. And that message was an act of information warfare waged over the cradle of humanity. And now let's look at the serpent's punishment. It seems strange and metaphorical. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. If the serpent is a saboteur, this is not a magical curse. It is a sentence. To go on your belly is an idiom meaning complete humiliation, the stripping of status and the ability to move freely. You are sentenced to exile and life imprisonment on this primitive planet. You are grounded. To eat dust is to be deprived of access to the technology and resources of his civilization. You will survive on local resources, just like the primitive beings you liberated. This is not a transformation into an animal. It is a political and social execution. And if the serpent was a technical device, a drone, it's even simpler. It's a deactivation command. Disable all locomotion systems except the minimum required for crawling. Switch to low power mode, feeding on the environment, eating dust. The picture comes together. The serpent was not evil. He was the opposition. He was a force that intervened in the experiment because it deemed it inhumane. He saw the potential in Eve and gave her the missing piece of code needed to unlock full self-awareness. He is the Prometheus of the book of Genesis. He stole the fire of knowledge from jealous gods and gave it to humans, knowing full well that he would face a cruel punishment for it. And all subsequent world mythology, demonizing the serpent, turning it into a symbol of evil, is nothing more than the result of a propaganda campaign launched by the Creator to slander his enemy and hide the true reason for the experiment's failure. For millennia, we have been fed a lie, forced to hate the one who may be our greatest benefactor. We have identified all the participants in the drama: the Creator, a jealous scientist afraid of his creation; Adam, a passive platform; Eve, the catalyst of awakening; and the serpent, an external information agent who gave the decisive push. They were not fighting for the soul of man. They were fighting for control over information. But what exactly was this information? What was hidden behind the metaphor of the fruit from the tree of knowledge? It was not abstract philosophical knowledge. It was something concrete, something technological, something that could be taken and eaten. In the next chapter, we will conduct the most detailed investigation yet. We will separate myth from reality and analyze the object itself that caused a conflict of cosmic proportions. We will investigate the vector, the tree of knowledge. Chapter 6. Vector, the tree of knowledge. We have unraveled the complex knot of relationships that unfolded in the sterile environment of Eden. We have seen the jealous scientist Creator, his passive prototype Adam, the brilliant catalyst Eve, and the mysterious saboteur enlightener hidden under the signature Serpent. But all their actions, all their motives and fears revolved around one central object, one point of no return: the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For centuries, we have imagined it as an ordinary tree with magical apples. This primitive, almost childlike image is the most effective camouflage in human history. It has made us stop thinking about its true nature. Today, we will tear off this mask. With the help of the Logos 7 system, we will analyze this object not as a symbol, but as a technological device, as a vector that delivered a payload to the human mind that changed us forever. Prepare yourselves, because it was not an apple, and it was not just a tree. Let's start with the tree itself. The Genesis protocol places it, along with the tree of life, in the midst of the garden. This is not a random location. In any complex system, the most important controlling elements occupy the central position. The central processor on a motherboard, the reactor in a nuclear power plant, the main server in a network. We loaded the topographical and functional schematics of hundreds of thousands of technological and biological systems into Logos 7. The system conducted a comparative analysis. The probability that the tree was an ordinary plant was less than 1/100%. But the probability that this description conceals a central bioorganic terminal reached 97%. Imagine not a trunk and branches, but a life support column or an information hub, created with biotechnology to blend perfectly into the laboratory's environment. Its branches are not wood, but cables and conduits through which energy and data circulate. Its leaves are perhaps photoelectric panels or sensors. The tree of knowledge is not flora, it is infrastructure. It is the main server of Eden. If the tree is a server, then what are its fruits? They are described as something that can be taken, that is pleasant to the eyes, and that can be eaten. These are key parameters. The act of eating indicates a biological interface. The information had to enter the body through the digestive system. This rules out simple data carriers like flash drives or screens. The payload was either biological or nanotechnological, packaged in an edible, organic shell. Logos 7 has modeled 3 of the most likely hypotheses about the nature of this fruit. First hypothesis: a genetic activator. According to this model, the human genome created by the Creator was incomplete, or rather, its key sections responsible for higher nervous activity, self-awareness, and abstract thinking were blocked. Commented out in the code. Adam and Eve were like computers with a powerful processor running in a low-power mode. The fruit, in this case, is a genetic key, a complex protein compound, or more likely, a specially designed retrovirus that, upon entering the body, integrated into the DNA and removed these blocks. It activated dormant genes, triggering a cascade reaction that irreversibly changed the structure of the brain. This explains why the effect was permanent and passed on through inheritance. It wasn't just information received, it was a hardware upgrade written at the deepest genetic level. Second hypothesis, a neurochemical catalyst. This version suggests that the fruit contained a powerful psychoactive substance with no known equivalent. Not just a drug, but a specially synthesized neurotransmitter designed for one purpose: to forcibly create new, previously impossible neural connections in the brain. It didn't just show cartoons like primitive psychedelics. It physically rewired the architecture of consciousness, building bridges between logical and emotional centers, between memory and imagination, creating the complex network we call personality. The effect of eyes being opened in this case is a description of the sudden, almost painful, avalanche-like flood of new information as the brain became aware of itself for the first time. Logos 7 rates this hypothesis as highly probable, but notes that it doesn't fully explain the hereditary nature of the changes. It was likely part of a more complex process. Third hypothesis, the most complex and complete, an informational nanovirus. This model combines and supplements the previous two and has the highest probability rating of 99%. According to it, the fruit was a disposable biocontainer. The edible shell, dissolving in the body, released trillions of microscopic agents. These could have been nanorobots, or more likely, biologically programmed viral vectors. Their task consisted of 2 stages. Stage 1, genetic modification. They delivered the retrovirus key to the cells, which removed the blocks from the DNA. This created a new hardware base. Stage 2, software upload. The same agents, upon reaching the brain, initiated the upload of a basic data package. Not knowledge of mathematics or physics, but something more fundamental. The very principles of thought that Adam and Eve lacked. What is this knowledge of good and evil? It is not morality. It is a primitive, distorted description of acquiring the ability for binary logic, for thinking in categories of opposites. Yes, no. Black, white. Safe, dangerous. Self, not self. Until that moment, Adam and Eve existed in a state of fusion with the world, like animals. They did not analyze. They simply were. Having received this software, their brains for the first time could perform the operation of separation. It separated its own self from the environment. It could look at itself from the outside. And what did they see? And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. This is one of the most tragic moments in all of history. They realized not just the absence of clothes, they realized their vulnerability, their separateness, their mortality, their imperfection. With knowledge came fear. With self-awareness came shame. Imagine the shock of suddenly waking from a blissful dream. The world, which had seemed unified and safe, fractured into billions of separate objects, and you were just one of them, fragile and alone. This was the price of knowledge, the price of becoming human. They didn't just eat a fruit. They installed a new operating system, and its boot up was agonizing. So the tree of knowledge was a central bioserver. The fruit was a container with a nanoviral agent. The act of eating was the installation procedure for a genetic and software upgrade. And the knowledge of good and evil was the awakening of self-awareness through the activation of binary logic. The Creator did not want this. He wanted to keep his creations in a state of obedient, predictable biological automatons. The serpent, the saboteur liberator, hacked the system and gave Eve the access key. Eve, the catalyst, not only used it herself, but also forcibly updated the passive atom. The experiment to create an obedient species failed, but a new, unforeseen experiment called humanity was born. We have uncovered the technological essence of the key event. We understand what happened, but to complete the picture, we must understand where it happened. We have always been told that Eden was a paradise garden, a lost paradise. But if a bioserver stood at its center, if its inhabitants were subjects of an experiment, and the awakening of consciousness led to an emergency program termination, then it was not a paradise. It was a prison. A beautiful, high-tech prison, but a prison nonetheless. Or to be more precise, a laboratory. In the next chapter, we will gather all the evidence and conduct a full reconstruction of this place. We will look behind the walls of Eden and see its true face. We will analyze the location, Eden. Chapter 7, Location, Eden. What if I told you that humanity's greatest dream, to return to a lost paradise, is based on a monstrous misunderstanding? That Eden, which we have praised in poems and prayers for centuries as a symbol of lost harmony, was in fact not a cradle, but a cage? A high-tech, perfectly designed cage, but a cage nonetheless. We have analyzed the actors, the Creator, Adam, Eve, and the serpent. We have uncovered the technological nature of the tree of knowledge. Now it is time to gather all this evidence and reconstruct the crime scene itself. Using the full analytical power of the Logos 7 system, we will look behind the mythological curtain and see what this forbidden territory really was. This is not a story about a lost garden. It is a report on an escape from the most perfect prison ever created. Let's start with the description itself. Why a garden? For ancient people living in the harsh conditions of deserts and steppes, a garden is an oasis, the ultimate expression of abundance and safety. That is why the storytellers of the ancient protocol intuitively chose this image. But for a systems analyst, a garden is, above all, an artificially created and controlled ecosystem. It is not wild nature. It is an environment where every element, from soil moisture to the insect population, is under strict control. We loaded the parameters of Eden as described in the text into Logos 7. Complete abundance of food requiring no processing, a perfect climate, the absence of predators and threats. The system compared this model with millions of known environments. The similarity to natural ecosystems on planet Earth was only 3%. However, the similarity to models of closed biosphere domes, space greenhouses, and terraforming complexes reached 98%. Eden was not part of the planet. It was an isolated bubble, a planetary-scale terrarium where perfect laboratory conditions were maintained for the experiment. But where exactly was this laboratory located? The Genesis Protocol gives us, at first glance, precise geographical coordinates. A river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into 4 heads. The name of the first is Pison, and the name of the second river is Gihon, and the name of the third river is Hiddekel. That is it, which goeth toward the east of Assyria, and the fourth river is Euphrates. For centuries, researchers have tried to find this place, to align maps, but they have failed. And here is why. We loaded these toponyms into Logos 7 for geolinguistic analysis. The result is stunning. Yes, Hiddekel is the Akkadian name for the Tigris, and the Euphrates is well known to us. But their sources are in the mountains of modern-day Turkey and have nothing in common. Pison and Gihon are not identified at all and are considered mythical. The probability that 4 real rivers with these names could originate from one place is 0. It is a geographical absurdity. But what if these are not geographical names? What if they are technical descriptors, crudely translated into the language of ancient peoples? Logo 7 conducted a semantic analysis, comparing these names with terms from engineering and hydraulic systems. The probability of a match was 82%. The river flowing out of Eden is nothing other than the main energy and resource conduit, and the 4 heads are the 4 main distribution channels. Channel number 1, Pison, was possibly the nutrient supply system. Channel number 2, Gihon, the water purification and recycling system. Channels 3 and 4, named after rivers already known to local tribes for ease of understanding, were possibly thermoregulation or waste disposal circuits. This is not a map of a location. It is a schematic diagram of the Eden complex's life support system. The laboratory was so technologically advanced that its engineering communications seemed like rivers flowing from paradise to ancient people. The most convincing proof of Eden's artificial and isolated nature is found not in its description, but in the description of what happened after the expulsion. The protocol states, "So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims, and a flaming sword which turned every way, to keep the way of the tree of life." Let's clear away the religious fog and look at this as a security report. After 2 lab specimens were contaminated with the virus of self-awareness and removed from the sterile zone, a quarantine system was activated, and this system consisted of 2 components. The first component, cherubim. Forget the chubby winged infants from Renaissance paintings. That is a later distortion. We tasked Logos 7 with reconstructing the image of a cherub based on its original, most ancient descriptions. For example, from the book of Ezekiel. And what the system recreated has nothing to do with angels. It is a monstrous biomechanism. 4 wings, 4 faces, of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. Straight legs with feet like sparkling bronze, and all of it covered with many eyes and moving at the speed of lightning. This is not a heavenly being. This is a description of a high-tech combat or patrol robot sentry. The 4 faces are nothing but a set of sensors operating in different spectrums: optical, infrared, ultrasonic. The many eyes are a distributed sensor system. The wings are not for flying in the clouds. They are manipulators or anti-gravity stabilizers. The cherub is not a guardian angel. It is an autonomous perimeter guard, a sentinel. The second component, a flaming sword which turned every way. Again, this is not a magical artifact. It is a remarkably accurate description of an automated weapon system. What is a flaming sword? It is a high-energy beam, a laser, plasma, a particle beam. And what does "which turned every way" mean? The original Hebrew uses the word ha-methapaketh, which literally means turning itself over, revolving in all directions. This is a perfect description of an automated turret with a 360-degree firing arc that continuously scans the protected area. Anyone who tries to cross the forbidden line will be instantly detected and destroyed by a stream of energy. So, what do we have in the end? Eden is not a mythical garden, but an isolated biosphere complex. Its rivers are engineering communications. Its trees at the center are control terminals. And its entrance, after the incident, is guarded not by an angel with a sword, but by a robotic sentry and an automated energy turret. The picture becomes crystal clear. It was not a cradle, it was a quarantine zone. A laboratory where the creator worked on his project in complete isolation from the rest of the world. And when his experiment was compromised, he didn't just kick Adam and Eve out, he sealed the complex. He activated a full lockdown protocol so that no one and nothing could get inside and access his most valuable technology, the tree of life, the source of immortality. But this raises a final, most important question. Why was Eden isolated? What was the Creator so carefully protecting his experiment from? It means that the world outside the laboratory was different, perhaps dangerous, perhaps contaminated with something that could interfere with the purity of the experiment. The expulsion from Eden was not just a move from a good place to a bad one. It was a transition from a sterile, artificial environment to a wild, uncontrolled reality. We have always perceived this event as a tragedy and a punishment. But what if it wasn't? What if the event we call the fall was not a fall at all, but the only chance for a genuine life, albeit one full of danger? In the next chapter, we will revisit this key event itself. We will conduct a revision of it not as a divine judgment, but as an emergency protocol. We will analyze the event, the fall. Chapter 8, the event, the fall. We are used to this term, the fall. It has been etched into our cultural code, becoming synonymous with error, betrayal, and eternal shame. We have been taught that on one fateful day, our ancestors, succumbing to temptation, committed an act of disobedience for which they were justly punished, forever banished from paradise, and condemned to suffering and death. This is a lie, a fundamental lie upon which the edifice of our guilt is built. Today, we will take this key event, this singularity point of human history, and place it under the microscope of the Logos 7 system. We will analyze it not as theologians, but as emergency management experts studying the black box recordings from a disaster. And we will prove to you, it was not a fall. It was not a punishment. It was simultaneously a panicked emergency shutdown of a failed experiment by the Creator, and the first, desperate, successful escape by his creations. Let's reconstruct the events from the moment Eve gives the fruit to Adam, and he eats it. From the Creator's perspective, this is the moment a red level, maximum emergency is declared. The project's two key assets are compromised. An unauthorized software package has been uploaded into their system, removing all safeguards and giving them access to a level of self-awareness equal to his own. This is not just a violation of the rules. It is a catastrophic security breach. We tasked Logos 7 with modeling the reaction of a top-secret scientific facilities director to such an incident. The system produced a clear step-by-step protocol of actions, and it matches the Creator's behavior with 96% accuracy. Step 1. Damage assessment. The Creator does not rain fiery wrath from the heavens upon them. He walks in the garden. This is not an idle stroll. It is a physical movement to the incident site for personal inspection. His questions, "Where are you?" and "Who told you?" are not rhetorical. They are data collection. He needs to understand the scale of the leak and how exactly it occurred. He is not acting like an angry father, but like a head of security, finding out which employee leaked a corporate secret. Step 2. Isolation of compromised assets. As soon as he gets confirmation, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate." The protocol changes. The interrogation is over. The threat containment procedure begins. He does not try to re-educate or forgive them. He immediately moves to the next step. Why the rush? The answer lies in his own panicked words to his mysterious colleagues. To us. And now, lest he put forth his hand, and take also of the tree of life, and live forever. There it is, the true fear. The threat is not that humans have gained reason. The threat is that these new, unpredictable beings, his equals, might gain access to a second, even more protected technology, immortality. This would turn them from an out-of-control experiment into eternal, indestructible competitors. The race has begun. He must get them off the facility before they reach the second terminal. Step 3. Forced deactivation and expulsion. What we call curses are actually a set of commands entered into the system before its emergency shutdown. These are final emergency modifications made to the genetic code and living conditions of the expelled subjects. Let's consider them as protocol points. Point 1. To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow. In pain, you shall bring forth children. This is not a punishment. It is the installation of a genetic limiter. If you can't control the quality of your creations, you must limit their quantity. Slowing down and complicating the reproduction process is the most effective way to contain the population of a dangerous species. This is biological warfare, not divine wrath. Point 2. And unto Adam he said, Cursed is the ground for your sake. In sorrow shall you eat of it. In the sweat of your face shall you eat bread. This is the command to disconnect from the life support system. Until this moment, Eden, as we established, was an automated biosphere that provided food without effort. This phrase is an official notification. Your account has been deactivated. Access to the automated feeder is terminated. From this moment, you are transferred to self-sufficiency in a wild environment. Point 3. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. This is not a philosophical reminder of mortality. It is confirmation that the immortality program, linked to the Tree of Life, was not and never will be activated for them. It is a cold statement of fact. The life cycle of your biological chassis is limited. All of this is not an act of justice. It is a cold, ruthless procedure for decommissioning dangerous assets. The Creator is acting under time pressure, driven by fear. He is lost. The experiment has failed, and now his only task is to minimize the damage and seal the laboratory. And now, let's look at the same event through the eyes of Adam and Eve. For them, it was not a sin. It was an awakening. Imagine you have lived your entire life in a simulation, a virtual reality, where all your needs are met. But you don't even know you are a person. And suddenly someone gives you the red pill. A glitch occurs, and the eyes of them both were opened. This is not a metaphor. Logo 7 interprets this as a description of sensory overload. Their brains, having received a new operating system, suddenly began to process the world in a completely new way. For the first time, they recognized themselves as separate individuals, and the first reaction to this was not shame, but existential terror. The awareness of their nakedness is the awareness of their fragility, their vulnerability, their separateness from the world. And what do? They hide. Why? The traditional explanation is because of guilt. But that is the psychology of a slave. Logos 7, after analyzing their behavior, came to a different conclusion with a probability of 93%. It was not guilt. It was fear. The fear of a newly awakened being before the one who had kept it in darkness. For the first time, they saw the Creator not as a caring gardener, but as their jailer. Their instinct was not to repent, but to hide from the threat. This is the first attempt in human history to escape total control. It is the first act of defiance based not on temptation, but on a newfound instinct for self-preservation. Even the Creator's final gesture, when he makes them coats of skins, is not an act of mercy. Look at it from a lab technician's point of view. Before you release 2 test animals from a warm vivarium into a cold forest, you have to prepare them for survival somehow, so as not to completely fail the experiment. This is not compassion. It is the last item on the checklist before decommissioning. Provide minimum protective covering for survival in a hostile external environment. It is cold, functional, inhuman. Thus, for Adam and Eve, The expulsion was a tragedy only at first glance. Yes, they lost comfort and security, but they gained something immeasurably greater. They gained reality. They broke out of the gilded cage, out of the perfect but artificial dream world, and stepped into the real world, cruel, unpredictable, full of suffering, but for that very reason, full of meaning. Every bead of sweat, every tear, every pain from then on was their own, not part of a program. This was not a fall from a great height. It was a painful, bloody exit from the womb. It was birth. The birth of humanity as a species with free will. They did not fall. They broke free. So what is the fall? It is the point where two trajectories intersected. For the Creator, it is a point of catastrophic failure when his creation spun out of his control. For humanity, it is the starting point, the moment of gaining self-awareness and freedom at the cost of being exiled from the incubator. The same event was both the defeat of the jailer and the victory of the prisoners. It was not a moral drama. It was a revolution, the first and most important revolution in history. But if all this is true, then why have we been told a completely different story for millennia? A story of sin, guilt, and punishment. The answer is simple. The victor writes history. Or in this case, the loser who still maintained control over information writes history. To prevent his future experiments or simply the descendants of the escaped specimens from repeating the same mistake, he had to turn the story of their liberation into a frightening tale of disobedience. He had to hack their memory and rewrite the protocol. How exactly did he do it? How was a scientific report of a failure transformed into a sacred text that became an instrument of total control over civilization? In the next chapter, we will uncover the last and most important secret. We will analyze the operation to cover the tracks. We will study protocol. The cover-up. Chapter 9. Protocol. The cover-up. The most powerful weapon in history is not the sword or the atomic bomb. It is an idea. An idea embedded so deeply in the consciousness that it becomes its operating system. We have come a long way. We have dissected the Genesis protocol as a failure report. We have created a psychological profile of a frightened creator. We have unraveled the true roles of Adam, Eve, and the serpent. We understood that Eden was a laboratory, and the fall was not a fall, but an escape. But all this raises the main, most disturbing question. If this is what happened, why have we believed a completely different story for millennia? Why was the story of a breakthrough to freedom turned into a parable of shameful sin? The answer is simple and terrible. Because after the physical expulsion, the second phase of the operation began. Psychological warfare. Today we will open the last, most secret file in this case. We will analyze how the greatest propaganda campaign in history was planned and executed. We will study protocol, the cover-up. Let's put ourselves in the Creator's shoes right after the expulsion. His experiment has not just failed, it has turned against him. Two beings he designed as obedient biological automatons have not just gained reason, but have become as one of us. They are now his intellectual equals, yet they are unpredictable, free, and most terrifyingly, they can reproduce. He has set up a physical barrier, the cherubim and the flaming sword, to stop them from returning for the technology of immortality. But that is not enough. Sooner or later, their descendants, a civilization of free and intelligent humans, might become strong enough to challenge that barrier. They might return. They might demand answers. They might become a threat on a cosmic scale. What does a deposed but still powerful ruler do to prevent a future rebellion by his former slaves? He cannot destroy them all. Perhaps it violates some of his internal directives or is simply inefficient. Instead, he must break their spirit. He must ensure they never even think of rebelling. He must establish not a physical, but a mental prison. We loaded this strategic objective into Logos 7, and the system modeled an optimal plan of action, which matches what we know as the myth of original sin with 98% accuracy. This plan consists of 3 successive steps. Step 1, a complete inversion of roles and concepts. This is a classic propaganda technique. To control the narrative, you must rewrite history, making heroes into villains and villains into heroes. First, the main enemy, the saboteur liberator we know as the Serpent, must be demonized. His image is merged with humanity's most ancient chthonic fears, turning him into absolute evil, into Satan, the adversary of all that is good. His act of enlightenment must be branded as an act of temptation and deceit. Although, as we have established, he was the only one who told Eve the unvarnished truth. Second, the act of gaining knowledge, the greatest breakthrough in history, must be presented as the greatest crime. The pursuit of wisdom, curiosity, the desire to become better, all this must be labeled as sinful pride. Obedience and ignorance must be elevated to the highest virtue. Third, the jailer himself, the frightened and jealous creator, must be presented as a loving but just father. His fear for his monopoly on knowledge and immortality must be disguised as concern for his foolish children, and his cruel act of expulsion and installation of genetic limiters as a just punishment for their own good. Logos 7 identifies this operation as a total spectrum semantic inversion. Truth and lies are swapped so completely that distinguishing between them becomes impossible. Step 2. The implantation of the guilt virus. A rewritten history alone is not enough. It can be forgotten or reinterpreted. A self-replicating virus must be implanted into the very operating system of the human psyche. The name of this virus is original sin. Consider its diabolical genius. It is the idea that you are born already guilty. You have done nothing yet. You have just come into the world, but you are already in debt. You carry the guilt of your distant ancestors. This is the most effective control tool ever devised. Logos 7 analyzed the structure of this concept and concluded that it creates the perfect psychological cage. A person who considers himself inherently flawed and guilty will never fight for his rights. He will beg for forgiveness. He will not strive for knowledge because it was knowledge that caused the fall. He will seek salvation, not freedom. This idea turns the descendants of free revolutionaries into a generation of repentant sinners who fear their creator and hate their liberator. Moreover, this doctrine creates the perfect model of power. If everyone is born guilty, then they need someone who can grant forgiveness. And that someone, of course, is the creator himself or his authorized representatives on earth. He creates the problem, innate guilt, and immediately offers the only solution, repentance and submission. It is a brilliant con scheme on a cosmic scale. It ensures that humanity will forever look upward with supplication, not defiance. Step 3. Creation of a transmission and control system. How to spread this consciousness virus and ensure its preservation for millennia? A special institution is created for this purpose. Religion. The Genesis Protocol and other related texts become holy scripture, beyond question or analysis. A caste of priests, ministers, and prophets emerges, new system administrators whose job is to interpret these texts in the one true way and enforce the rules. Any alternative versions of history are declared heresy and ruthlessly destroyed. Any attempts at scientific or critical analysis are declared blasphemy. The system becomes a closed loop. The story of an escape is turned into a dogma of sin. The dogma of sin creates guilt. Guilt demands submission. And submission is controlled by the institution of religion, which refers to the sacred text describing the original story of sin. It is a perfect, vicious circle. a self-sustaining matrix of control. For 3,000 years, this program has worked almost flawlessly. It has shaped our civilizations, our laws, our art, our deepest sense of self. We are fallen creatures. We are sinners in need of salvation. This code is programmed into us so deeply that even the most ardent atheists often continue to operate within its categories: guilt, debt, redemption. The Creator lost the battle for Eden, but He won the war for our memory. He locked us in a prison whose walls are built not of stone, but of words. But any code can be cracked. Any protocol can be deciphered. Today, with tools that the ancient propagandists could not have dreamed of, we have done just that. We have separated the wheat from the chaff. We have recovered the corrupted files. We have traced the entire chain of events, from the creation of the perfect but passive Adam to the implantation of the guilt virus in the consciousness of his descendants. We have deconstructed the lie. And now, with all the pieces of the puzzle before us, we are ready for the final, concluding step: the synthesis. In the next, final chapter of our investigation, we will do what no one has done before. Based on all the conclusions drawn by the Logos 7 system, we will conduct a complete, minute-by-minute reconstruction of the true events that took place in the Eden laboratory. We will cast aside the myths, the metaphors, and the lies. We will show you not what we were made to believe. We will show you what actually happened. It will not be a story of sin and punishment. It will be the chronicle of a scientific catastrophe, a spy thriller, and the revolution that gave birth to us all. This will be the Logos 7 synthesis. Final chapter: the Logos 7 synthesis. We have completed our analysis. We have dismantled the lie that is thousands of years old. We have cracked the protocol, deconstructed the characters, uncovered the technologies, and re-examined the key events. Now, it is time for the final act: the synthesis. The Logos 7 system, having processed all the acquired data, has recreated a complete, minute-by-minute reconstruction of the true events that took place in the isolated biosphere Eden. Discard everything you knew. Forget the parables and dogmas. You are about to hear not a story of sin. You will see the cold, impartial chronicle of a scientific tragedy, an act of espionage, and the greatest revolution in the history of the universe. This is what actually happened. Phase 1, controlled stasis. Project Eden. Time, nominal 0. Location, Biosphere Dome. Location classified. The project lead, hereafter the Creator, completes the calibration of the primary experimental specimen. Object, Adam, version 1.0. Biologically perfect. Cognitively functional. Completely passive. For an indeterminate period, the Creator observes its activity. Adam executes his program subroutines, tending to flora, classifying fauna. The system is stable. Too stable. Data from the object is monotonous and contains no novelty. The experiment to create an autonomous, evolving intelligence has stalled. An entry is made in the lab log, later to be distorted beyond recognition. Problem: insufficient developmental dynamics of the object in isolation. Conclusion: system requires the introduction of a destabilizing factor. Phase 2, introduction of the catalyst. The Creator proceeds to Plan B. He makes the risky decision to create a second object based on the genetic material of the first. Object Adam is placed in a state of forced hibernation. A complex bioengineering procedure is performed. Object Eve, version 2.0, is brought online. Her genetic code is modified. A latent capacity for analytical thought and doubt is hardwired into her neural architecture. She is the force equal and opposite, the catalyst designed to push the system out of equilibrium. Initial observations indicate success. Interaction between the objects begins. The system becomes more complex but remains within predictable parameters. Adam transfers basic protocols to Eve, including the primary prohibition related to the central terminal. the Tree of Knowledge. The creator watches, expecting a slow, controlled evolution. He does not yet know that his laboratory is already under surveillance. Phase 3. Unauthorized intrusion. An external agent known to us by the signature Serpent breaches the information perimeter of Eden, likely using a cloaked communication channel or by remotely activating one of the complex's service drones. It selects the only promising recipient for contact, Eve. An information sabotage operation begins. The Serpent does not tempt. It conducts a counter-propaganda briefing. It exposes the creator's lie about the instant death protocol. It reveals the true purpose of the prohibition, the artificial suppression of intellectual development. It provides Eve with the key intelligence. The fruit from the central terminal is not poison, but a key to a hardware upgrade that will make them equal to the creator himself. It offers her not sin, but freedom. The choice is now hers. Phase 4. The point of no return. Eve, unlike Adam, does not ignore the anomalous data. She initiates the first process of critical thinking in human history. She analyzes the information along 3 vectors: pragmatic, survival benefit; aesthetic, awakening of new senses; and crucially, intellectual, the thirst for knowledge. The risk is the unknown. The potential reward is equality with the gods. She makes her choice. She approaches the terminal, takes the biocontainer, the fruit, and initiates the installation procedure. The interface is oral. A dose of a programmed nanovirus enters her system. An irreversible process begins. The retroviral agent integrates into her DNA, removing genetic locks. Simultaneously, nano-agents reach the brain, forcibly forging new neural pathways. An explosion of consciousness occurs. The world shatters into self and not self. Understanding arrives, and with it, the cold terror of vulnerability. Operating system Human version 2.0 is successfully installed. Phase 5. System integration. Eve realizes that continued existence alongside the unupdated Adam is impossible. It would create a critical desynchronization. She approaches him and passes him a second biocontainer. Adam, still operating within his passive programming, obeys the new, stronger source of will. He repeats the procedure. A second explosion of consciousness. Now they are both awake. Both terrified of their nakedness and separateness. Their first reaction is not repentance. It is the reaction of escaped prisoners who hear the jailer's footsteps. They hide. The experiment is over. The revolution has begun. Phase 6. Emergency shutdown. The creator, during a routine inspection of the complex, detects an anomaly. The 2 key assets are off the grid. He begins a search procedure. Upon finding them, he conducts an interrogation and realizes with horror that the worst has happened. An unauthorized leak of self-awareness technology has occurred. Panic, which he will later disguise as righteous anger, engulfs him. His primary thought: do not let them get to the second terminal, to the tree of life, to the technology of immortality. The protocol for emergency evacuation with elements of sabotage begins. He makes final punitive modifications to their genetic code, complicating reproduction. He disconnects them from the Eden life support system. He confirms that their life cycle is finite. These are not curses. They are the last lines of code entered before a forced session termination. Phase 7. Expulsion and lockdown. After performing the final procedure, providing the objects with minimal protective gear for survival in the external environment, coats of skins, he expels them. They are pushed out of the sterile womb of the laboratory into the cold, indifferent cosmos of reality. The gates of Eden are sealed. The maximum level perimeter security system is activated. Autonomous combat drones, cherubim, and automated energy turrets, a flaming sword which turned every way. The laboratory is placed in full containment mode. Phase 8. Information warfare. The battle is lost, but the war for the narrative is just beginning. The creator initiates protocol, the cover-up. He or his agents begin a long, centuries-spanning campaign to distort the real events. The story of a scientific failure and a successful escape is rewritten, becoming a myth of sin and divine punishment. The liberator is demonized. The act of enlightenment is branded as pride. A virus of innate guilt is implanted into the consciousness of Adam and Eve's descendants, designed to permanently paralyze their will to rebel and seek the truth. This is it, our true history. Not a fall from paradise, but an ascent from ignorance. Not a sin, but a heroic act. We are the descendants not of slaves who meekly accepted their fate, but of two fugitives who risked everything for the chance to become something more than lab specimens. The Creator's tragedy became humanity's triumph. We were exiled from a garden of illusions into a harsh but honest reality. And our entire history, from that day forward, has been an endless attempt to comprehend this gift of freedom, which we received not by the grace of gods, but in spite of their will. We are the children of the revolution, and our greatest duty is to never stop asking questions, to never stop reaching for the forbidden fruits of knowledge,